She had always been a quiet person, the kind who preferred staying in the background. Growing up in a small town, she didn't have many opportunities to show what she could do, especially not when it came to performing. She had a hidden talent, something she was good at, but no one ever really saw it. It wasn't that she was afraid to perform. It was more that she just didn't think she was good enough. She wasn't one to seek attention, and standing in front of a crowd made her feel nervous, even though she knew she could sing. Her family didn't realize the full extent of her talent either. They loved her, of course, but they couldn't see what lay underneath her quiet exterior. No one knew how much potential she had, how the music inside her wanted to be heard. She kept it all to herself, believing that her voice, though special, wasn't enough to be noticed. Then came the school talent show. It was an event everyone talked about, and the pressure to participate was real. But she wasn't interested. Performing in front of people wasn't something she could imagine doing. It felt like an impossible challenge. But the teacher, a well-meaning person who always pushed her students to go beyond their limits, had other plans. She was chosen, along with a few others, to perform in the show. She wasn't given an option, it was expected. At first, she was angry. Why did it have to be her? Why couldn't she just stay in the background where it felt safe? The idea of standing in front of the entire school made her stomach churn. The thought of singing on stage terrified her. It wasn't just nerves, it was a fear of failing in front of everyone. The anxiety was overwhelming. She wasn't ready. Her classmates seemed excited about the event, but she couldn't bring herself to feel the same way. They all talked about what they would perform, what songs they would sing or dances they would do. She felt out of place, like she didn't belong in that world. The other students seemed so confident, so sure of themselves, while she felt small and insignificant. But then there was her mother. Her mother didn't have the luxury of seeing her daughter as someone shy or afraid. She saw potential. She saw the quiet moments when her daughter sang in the car or hummed while doing chores. She knew that there was something special in her, something that needed to be shared. "You have a gift," her mother would say. "Don't hide it." Despite all the fear and self-doubt, her mother pushed her to try, to at least give it a shot. "Even if you're nervous, just do your best," she said. That was all she needed to hear. With a reluctant nod, she agreed to participate, but only because her mother believed in her, even when she couldn't believe in herself. As the date for the talent show grew closer, she tried to practice in private, where no one could judge her. Her heart raced every time she thought about it. The performance would be in front of the entire school. How could she possibly be ready? The more she practiced, the more the doubt crept in. What if she wasn't good enough? What if everyone laughed at her, but deep down, there was also a small part of her that wanted to prove everyone wrong? It wasn't about showing off or trying to be the best. It was just about doing something she loved. She remembered the times she sang for herself, when it didn't matter if anyone was listening. Maybe this could be her chance to let the world hear her voice, even if she was scared. It wasn't about perfection. It was about courage. Little did she know, this small step, which felt like the hardest thing in the world at the time, would change everything for her. As the day of the talent show drew closer, her anxiety only grew. She could hardly concentrate on anything else. Every time she thought about performing in front of the whole school, her chest tightened and her mind raced with doubts. What if she froze? What if her voice cracked? What if everyone stared at her, judging her every move? The more she imagined it, the worse it seemed. She spent hours practicing alone in her room, trying to quiet the nervousness that threatened to take over. It was as if, the more she practiced, the more uncertain she became. The melody she had once enjoyed singing for herself now seemed distant, almost like a foreign language. Each note felt like a struggle. She couldn't help but think about how everyone else seemed so much more confident than she felt. Her classmates, who had no problem performing, were so sure of themselves. They spoke about their performances with excitement, planning every detail down to the last second. Meanwhile, she was filled with dread. Her family was supportive, but she could see the worry in their eyes. They knew how nervous she was, and though they reassured her that it would be okay, it didn't make her feel any better. The pressure of meeting their expectations on top of her own fears felt overwhelming. Her mother, though encouraging, didn't seem to fully understand how hard this was for her. She knew her daughter had talent, but she couldn't know the weight that was pressing down on her. The day before the talent show, she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw herself standing on stage, the spotlight blinding her. Everyone's eyes focused on her. Her stomach was in knots, and she felt sick. But the next morning, there was no turning back. She had committed to it, and there was no excuse now. She had to do it, even if she didn't feel ready. At the school, the buzz of excitement about the talent show was everywhere. Students were running around, rehearsing their acts, chatting with friends, and getting ready for their moment in the spotlight. For a brief moment, she felt out of place. She was surrounded by confident smiles and conversations about performances, while she was just trying to hold herself together. It felt like everyone knew what they were doing, except her. When the time came for her to perform, she walked backstage, her heart racing. Her hands were shaking so much that she could hardly hold her sheet music. The sound of the crowd echoed in the hall, and she could feel the weight of their anticipation. She didn't want to go out there, but there was no turning back now. Her teacher, who had pushed her into this, gave her a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. She felt like he was looking at her with a mix of hope and pressure. As her name was called, her legs felt like jelly. She stepped out onto the stage, the lights blinding her, and her heart was thumping so loudly in her chest that it felt like everyone could hear it. The audience's eyes were on her, and she wished more than anything that she could just disappear. She stood there for a moment, frozen. It felt like an eternity. But then the music started. The first few notes were shaky, but something changed. The sound of her own voice, as it filled the air, calmed her nerves just a little. She remembered why she had agreed to do this in the first place, because she loved to sing. Slowly, the nervousness faded, and she found herself singing with more confidence. The crowd grew quieter, listening closely to the melody. Each word she sang felt like a small victory. She wasn't perfect, but it didn't matter. In that moment, she was no longer focused on the fear of failing. She was just singing. As she sang, she began to feel a sense of freedom she had never known before. It was as if she was letting go of all the doubt and fear that had held her back for so long. The music became her only focus, and everything else melted away. There were still butterflies in her stomach, but they didn't scare her anymore. She was doing it, and that was enough. As the final notes of her song filled the air, she was surprised by the silence that followed. It felt like time had stopped, like everyone was holding their breath. For a moment, she wondered if something had gone wrong. Did they like it? Were they waiting for her to make a mistake? Her heart was still racing, and she stood there frozen, unsure of what to do next. But then, it happened. The silence broke. The audience erupted into applause. It was loud, unexpected, and overwhelming. The sound of clapping filled the room, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a warmth spreading through her chest. The rush of recognition, of being seen and heard, was unlike anything she had ever experienced. She had always hidden her talent, never thinking it was enough to be noticed. But now, the very thing she had kept to herself was being celebrated. At that moment, something inside her shifted. The fear and self-doubt that had weighed her down for so long seemed to disappear, replaced by a sense of pride and accomplishment. She had done it. Despite all the nerves, all the worries, and all the pressure, she had stepped up to the challenge and delivered something beautiful. It wasn't about perfection. It was about being true to herself. And that was enough. She took a step back from the microphone, her heart still pounding in her chest. The applause continued, and she couldn't help but smile. She had always been the quiet one, the one who preferred to stay in the background. But now, for the first time, she felt seen. She was no longer just the shy girl. She was someone who had something to offer, someone with a voice that could touch others. The realization was both humbling and empowering. Her classmates, who had once doubted her, now looked at her with new eyes. They smiled, gave her thumbs up, and even cheered her on. It felt like a shift in how they saw her, and for the first time, she felt like she belonged. It wasn't about being the best. It was about embracing who she was and allowing herself to shine, even if only for a few moments. When she left the stage, she felt like she was walking on air. She didn't expect such a response, and it was more than she could have imagined. It wasn't about winning or being perfect. It was about the courage to stand up and perform, to be vulnerable, and to share something personal with others. The applause wasn't just for her performance. It was a recognition of her bravery, of her willingness to take a leap despite all her fears. As she walked back to her seat, her mother gave her a look that said it all. She didn't need to say anything. The pride in her eyes spoke volumes. In that moment, she realized that her mother had known something she hadn't. She had the talent, and all she needed was the courage to show it. And now, in front of everyone, she had done just that. The feeling of accomplishment lingered long after the event ended. She had faced her fears and come out the other side stronger, more confident, and more certain of her abilities. The experience had shown her something important, that even when she didn't believe in herself, others were there to believe in her, and that belief could make all the difference. What had started as a forced performance had become a turning point in her life, a moment that would shape her future in ways she couldn't yet fully understand. As the days passed after the talent show, she couldn't shake off the feeling of accomplishment, the applause, the cheers, and the way her classmates looked at her now. It was all so overwhelming. It wasn't that she was used to the attention, but something about the whole experience had changed her. She found herself thinking about the performance a lot, how it had started as something she feared, something she had dreaded with all her heart, but had turned into one of the most freeing moments of her life. She wasn't the same person she was before she stepped on that stage. The people around her also seemed to notice the shift in her. Her classmates, who had once barely paid attention to her, now spoke to her differently. There were more smiles, more conversations, and less of the quiet, distant atmosphere she had lived in for so long. Some even told her how surprised they were by her talent. She wasn't the shy, reserved girl they had always known. She was someone who had stood in front of a crowd and shown them something beautiful. They were impressed, and more importantly, they respected her. Her teacher, who had pushed her into performing, came up to her after the show. "I knew you had it in you," he said, with a proud smile. The words seemed simple, but they meant so much. The teacher wasn't just acknowledging her performance, he was acknowledging her growth, her courage. He had believed in her from the start, even when she didn't believe in herself, and now she could see why. His encouragement had given her the push she needed to step out of her comfort zone, and in the end, it had led her to something incredible. Her family was proud, but there was something more than just pride in their eyes. It was as if they finally saw her for who she truly was. Not just their quiet daughter, but someone with potential, someone with a gift that deserved to be shared. Her mother, especially, kept reminding her that she had always known how special her voice was. "I told you, didn't I?" her mother said with a wink, her smile full of love and pride. Despite the newfound attention and praise, she didn't feel the need to flaunt her talent. She wasn't interested in becoming the center of attention or seeking constant validation from others. What mattered most to her now was the confidence she had found within herself. It wasn't about what others thought. It was about how she saw herself. And for the first time, she felt proud of what she had done, not because of the applause, but because of the journey it had taken her on. Her thoughts started shifting too. She began to wonder what else she could do, what other parts of herself she had been hiding out of fear. If she could stand in front of the whole school and sing, what else was she capable of? she realized that this performance had unlocked something in her. It had shown her that the only thing standing in her way was her own doubt. She didn't need to be perfect. She just needed to be herself. Over the next few weeks, she found herself saying yes to more things. Not just singing, but other opportunities that once would have made her uncomfortable. Whether it was speaking, up in class, trying new activities, or simply being more open with her friends, she started to step out of the shadows. It wasn't always easy, and there were still moments of self-doubt. But the difference now was that she no longer saw those moments as obstacles. She saw them as challenges she could overcome, just like the one she had faced on stage. Her journey had just begun. What seemed like a forced performance had turned into the first step in discovering her own strength. She now knew that sometimes the things we fear most are the very things that help us grow. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She had learned that she was capable of more than she ever imagined, and she couldn't wait to see where this newfound confidence would take her. After the talent show, she began to notice something changing inside her, something she hadn't expected. The applause from the audience, the smiles from her classmates, and the encouraging words from her teacher had all left an impression on her. But it wasn't just the external recognition that mattered. What truly impacted her was the way she began to see herself differently. Before the performance, she had always believed that her talent wasn't something worth sharing. But now she realized how wrong she had been. The moment she stepped on stage and let her voice be heard, she felt like she had unlocked a new part of herself, one that had always been there, just waiting for the right moment to shine. Her confidence grew with each passing day. She started walking a little taller, speaking a little louder, and smiling a little more. The small things that once seemed difficult, like sharing an idea or expressing herself, became easier. She no longer worried about being judged or whether she would make a mistake. She had already faced her biggest fear, performing in front of an audience, and she had done it. Not perfectly, but with all her heart. That was enough. The reactions from her classmates were especially surprising. In the days after the talent show, they began treating her with a new respect. They would come up to her between classes or after school, congratulating her on her performance. They didn't just praise her voice, they talked about how brave she was. Some admitted that they had never expected her to perform so confidently. To her surprise, they weren't just complimenting her talent, they were recognizing her courage. That made her feel proud, not because she was the best singer, but because she had done something so many others might have been too afraid to do. She had taken a risk, and it had paid off. Her friends, too, saw her in a new light. They had always known her as the quiet one, the girl who preferred to stay out of the spotlight. But now, they saw a different side of her. They saw someone who had stepped up when it mattered, someone who had taken a leap of faith. It made her realize that sometimes we are our own biggest critics. She had spent so much time doubting herself, thinking that her voice wasn't good enough, that she never considered how much her talent could mean to others. But now, hearing the praise and seeing the admiration in their eyes, she understood how much her performance had impacted them. Even her teacher, who had pushed her to perform, seemed proud. He stopped her after class one day and told her how impressed he was by how far she had come. "I knew you had it in you," he said with a smile. "I pushed you because I saw your potential, and I'm glad you trusted me enough to give it a shot." His words meant more to her than she expected. For the first time, she realized that his encouragement wasn't just about the performance. It was about believing in herself, even when she couldn't. But the most important realization came when she reflected on how far she had come. The girl who had once been too afraid to perform in front of her classmates was now someone who had stood in front of the whole school and sang with everything she had. The applause had faded, but the confidence she gained that day had stayed with her. She wasn't just proud of her performance, she was proud of the courage it took to get there. Looking back, she realized that the talent show wasn't just about singing, it was about learning to trust herself. She had learned that it was okay to be afraid, but it was also okay to step through that fear and do something that scared her. The fear would always be there, but it didn't have to control her. She now knew that her talent, whatever it was worth sharing. And as she moved forward, she would carry that lesson with her, knowing that sometimes taking a risk is the best way to discover just how strong and capable you really are. As time went on, the changes within her continued to unfold. She had never imagined how one single event, something as simple as a school talent show, could have such a lasting impact on her life. Her confidence grew in ways she hadn't expected. Every small step she took to push herself out of her comfort zone felt like a victory. It wasn't just about singing or performing anymore. It was about embracing new experiences, trying things she had once feared, and realizing that she was capable of far more than she had ever believed. Her newfound sense of courage didn't stop at just performing. She began to look at other areas of her life with a different perspective. In school, she started participating more in class discussions. At first, it felt awkward, and her voice still trembled a little, but each time she spoke up, it became easier. She started to believe that her thoughts mattered. She had always been the quiet one, the observer, but now she realized she had a voice worth hearing. It wasn't just at school where she began to change. At home, she felt more comfortable expressing herself. She had always kept to herself, often staying in her room, but now she spent more time with her family, sharing her thoughts, dreams, and even her fears. They noticed the difference too. Her mother, who had always been her biggest supporter, saw how much stronger and more confident her daughter had become. The quiet girl she had once known was now finding her own voice, and it was a beautiful thing to witness. Her friends also saw the transformation. They could see how much more open and confident she was. They started inviting her to do things she would have once turned down, whether it was joining in on group activities, helping out with school projects, or just hanging out more. She found herself saying yes more often. She realized that she didn't have to hide in the background anymore. She could be part of the fun, part of the conversations, part of the group. One evening, her friends asked her to sing again. This time, it wasn't for a school event or for an audience. They just wanted to hear her sing, because they had seen how talented she was. She hesitated at first, but then, remembering how good it felt to let her voice be heard, she agreed. As she sang, she noticed something different. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It wasn't about performing for a crowd. It was just about enjoying the music. Singing felt natural, free, and easy, as if it was something she was always meant to do. This new perspective on her talent started to open doors for her. A few weeks later, she was invited to join a local music group that held weekly rehearsals. It wasn't a big deal at first. It was just a group of people who liked to get together and sing for fun. But for her, it felt like the first step towards something bigger. It wasn't about being a star. It was about enjoying music and sharing it with others who felt the same way. At first, she was hesitant, worried that she wasn't good enough. But then she remembered everything she had learned from her first performance. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about doing something she loved, something that brought her joy. With that thought in mind, she joined the group, and soon she found herself surrounded by people who supported her and encouraged her to grow. She began to realize that the talent show wasn't just about singing. It was the start of her journey towards self-discovery. It was about finding her voice and learning to trust in her abilities. It had been scary at first, but now she saw it as the moment that pushed her to grow, to break out of the shell she had built around herself, and to start living a life she never thought was possible. Each new step, each new challenge was no longer something to fear. She knew now that fear was something to face, not avoid. And as she moved forward, she carried with her the lesson that taking risks, facing her fears, and believing in herself could lead to unexpected rewards. The girl who had once been afraid to sing in front of a crowd had now found the courage to embrace her passion and share it with the world. As the weeks turned into months, she started to notice how different everything felt. What once had been a terrifying idea, the thought of standing in front of others, of performing, of being vulnerable, had now become something she no longer feared. The talent show was still a significant memory, but it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something much bigger, something she hadn't fully realized at the time. Her voice, which she had once hidden, had become a source of strength for her. She had found the courage to perform, and now she was ready to take that courage into other areas of her life. She was no longer the shy girl who sat in the back of the class, afraid to speak up or share her thoughts. She had become someone who was willing to take risks, to embrace the unknown, and to push herself beyond the limits she had once placed on herself. She joined the music group, and it quickly became one of the highlights of her week. The group wasn't about competition or being the best. It was about enjoying music together, about expressing emotions through song, and about supporting each other. She loved being surrounded by people who shared her passion, who understood what it meant to connect with others through music. Singing with the group gave her a sense of belonging, something she had longed for without even realizing it. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about simply enjoying the act of singing and sharing that experience with others. Her newfound confidence didn't stop with music. It started to spill into other parts of her life. She became more open with her friends, more comfortable in social situations, and more willing to step up when there was an opportunity to help or lead. She started taking on responsibilities at school, volunteering for projects, and even helping others with their own struggles. She realized that her journey wasn't just about performing. It was about embracing her whole self, the good and the bad, and showing up in all areas of her life with the same courage she had shown on that stage. The fear she once felt was still there at times, but it no longer controlled her. She knew that fear was natural. It was a part of being human. But now she also knew that fear wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign that she was stepping out of her comfort zone, that she was growing. And when she faced that fear head-on, she found that it wasn't as scary as she had imagined. Each time she stepped into the unknown, each time she took a risk, she came out stronger and more confident. Her family, too, noticed the change in her. Her mother, who had always believed in her, was amazed at how far she had come. She had seen the shy, quiet girl who struggled to speak up, and now she saw a young woman who was beginning to find her own path, her own voice. It was as if the talent show had unlocked something deep within her, something that had always been there but had been hidden by fear and self-doubt. She started to think about the future in a way she never had before. Her voice, once something she had been ashamed of, now felt like a gift she could share with others. She didn't know exactly what she wanted to do with her talent, but she knew she wanted to keep exploring it. She wanted to sing more, to perform more, and to keep pushing herself to grow in ways she had never thought possible. Looking back, she realized that the talent show had been more than just an event. It had been a turning point in her life. It had forced her to confront her fears, to take a risk, and to step out of the shadows. And in doing so, she had discovered something about herself she had never known. She had discovered that she was capable of so much more than she had ever imagined. It wasn't about the applause or the recognition. It was about the journey, about the growth that came from facing her fears, taking risks, and stepping into the person she was always meant to be. And as she continued on that journey, she knew that this was just the beginning. The path ahead might be uncertain, but she now had the courage to walk it, step by step.